fellow steepers and stitchers, and welcome. My name is Sarah and you can find me on Instagram and Ravelry as Steeps and Stitches. This is the very first video on this channel in which I'm going to be talking about the things that I've been making and the things that I plan on making. I am a knitter predominantly, and I am a slow knitter. I physically knit slowly, I don't knit every day, and I usually have several projects on the go at any one time, so it takes me a little while for things to get done. I'm also a spinner. I like to spin my own yarn. At the moment, I'm still what I would call a novice spinner. I'm still kind of just playing around with things a little bit, although I've started to spin for very deliberate projects, which is something I will get onto later. And occasionally I can be found crocheting, but not particularly often. I have had a little drink. I love this mug. This is one of my favourite mugs that a friend of mine bought for me a couple of Christmases ago, and I absolutely love it. It is very true. I'm very proud to be a knitter. For those of you who have been watching my tea videos, it's coffee. Don't tell the teapot. But I just felt I wanted a little extra caffeine this morning. So the thing that I cast on, knit and cast off all within a week, which for me, this is unheard of. This is completely unheard of, but I just fell in love with this project. It is this. This is a vintage inspired waistcoat slash gilet slash sleeveless v-neck pull-on thing that I have made. I used the Grandstand cardigan, which is a 1939 pattern, as kind of the basis for this. The original pattern can be found on freeknitting.com, and it actually calls for sport weight yarn. And I did not make this in sport weight yarn. I do not have any sport weight yarn in my stash, and I wanted something a little heavier and cozier, just because it's getting a little chilly now. We're down into the minuses on a fairly regular basis, so I wanted something just a little bit more cozy for when I'm out in the garden or walking the dog. So this is actually knit out of Rowan pure Aran, pure wool Aran, sorry. This is the wool band for it. And I don't think they make this anymore. I think Rowan now does pure wool worsted, which is different. This yarn has been in my stash for 4.5, maybe even 5 years, and it was bought with a hat project in mind, which I then never made. I had 400 grams of it in my stash in 4 different colorways. So 400 grams total, 100 grams of each. So I had this lovely kind of cream, a dark navy, a light blue, and this lovely kind of forest green. I used 4.5mm needles for this bottom section of cream, just to kind of pull everything in. And then I used 5mm needles for everything kind of from the navy up. I did obviously have to do some maths jiggery pokery, because something that is designed for sport weight yarn, you can't just cast on the same number of stitches in Aran weight yarn and have it come out the same size. So, you know, had to do a little bit of thinking, which was actually really good fun. I had a little look around freeknitting.com and I found a couple of Aran weight cardigans from the same kind of era, and I had a little look at their stitch counts. I also knew that the original pattern was for a 34-inch bust, and I wanted to make a 38-inch bust. So I knew I was going to kind of play around with the maths a little bit anyway. I ended up casting on 196 stitches, and then I pretty much followed the pattern for the increases for the back, which the increases run along the side edge of the front panel and the side edge of the back panel. Now the pattern called for it all to be knit in pieces, but I actually cast it on all as one piece. And I think that is something that obviously we now have circular needles where we have very long cables in between our 2 points, whereas previously, unless you came from somewhere like Shetland or Cornwall or one of the big kind of coastal areas where there was lots of Guernsey, jersey, knit frock, whatever you want to call them, fishermen's kind of jumpers being knit, which were generally knit on very long pins in the round, but they were attached either at the waist with a belt or a holder so that you could kind of knit the big tubes. No one really used circular needles unless it was for small things like socks and hats. So everything was designed to be knit on flat needles and then seamed together. Whereas I didn't want to do that, and I don't have to do that because I have circular needles. So I cast on the front, one side of the front stitches, the back stitches, and then the other side of the front stitches to create one big piece, and it ended up looking like a very fat bottom W. Obviously I had to split for the arms, and then what I've done at the top is I've just used kitchen stitch or grafting stitch to graft the shoulder seams together. I did have to do a little bit of imaginative yarn usage when it came to the top, and you'll notice that my top back stripes are not the same as the top front stripes, and that is because I was playing a very, very, very close game of yarn chicken. In fact, I can show you how much yarn I have left out of the complete 400 grams. This is it. Little pile of scraps, just enough to be able to attach some buttons once I have bought them, and then that is it. It's all gone. I knew I wasn't going to be adding sleeves because I didn't want to add sleeves, and the way I finished off the armholes is just with a little bit of single crochet just to tidy those up there. This is not designed to be a super finessed garment. This is a workhorse garment. It is supposed to be cozy, warm, and something that can be worn time and time again whilst, like I say, out in the garden, walking the dog, or even just if I want a little extra layer in the house. It fits really quite nicely. I haven't blocked it yet. To be honest, I'm not sure if I'm going to. This is 2x2 rib. It is super, super stretchy, and it's also super, super cozy. I don't, to be honest, think I'm going to bother blocking it. All I need to do is add the buttons on. So yeah, I'm really pleased with this, and I completed this in less than a week, which, yeah, just amazed me. It just grew and grew and grew, and because it's stripes, like, oh, just get to the next stripe, and then you start the next stripe and you're like, oh, just get to the next stripe. So yeah, that was a really, really satisfying knit. Now from this, I thought, that was awesome. I want to make another vintage knit. And the Victoria and Albert Museum of the UK have released some 1940s patterns free of charge on their website, one of which is for pants and vest in mesh stitch. Now, I didn't fancy knitting any pants, and for those of you who are not European, pants refers to undergarments or knickers, not trousers, just to clarify. But I did really like the look of the vest, and I thought, oh, it'd be really nice to have like an underlayer. So I got cracking. Now, again, it calls for yarn that I didn't have in my stash. It calls for 3-ply yarn, which is a light fingering weight yarn, somewhere between lace, kind of now in this day and age, lace weight and fingering weight. And I don't have any of that either. So I decided I would make it in fingering weight yarn, and that would also then help with the fact that I needed to make it for the next kind of bust size up. So it's for a 36-inch bust, and I needed to make a 38-inch bust. So I followed the pattern completely. I used the 5.5mm needles that it called for. I followed the stitch count completely. And let me show you where I'm at. I decided to use, again, a yarn that has been in my stash for a very long time. This is Gnome Acres, and it's their really nice fancy gnome. There we go. So it's their fancy gnome based, which is 80% superwash merino, 10% cashmere, 10% nylon, and it was sent to me by a lovely, lovely friend who lives in the States. And the colourway is Little Bunny Foo Foo, which just makes me giggle every time I say it. So this is how far I have got. It's hard to kind of show it because it's still on the needles, but it has like almost like a little, I want to say peplum, but I don't think that's the right word. This is the bit that sits kind of around your hips, and then it comes in for the waist, and then this is where I've got to with the top, and the back I have already bound it off. Now, again, it called for it to be knit in pieces, and as you can see, I've done it on circular, knit it all in one piece. And today is the day that I am going to rip this whole thing out. It's not that I don't like it. I do like it. It's lovely yarn. It's so bloody soft. Oh, it's so soft. I desperately want to wear it. I really like the colours. I especially like this 1x1 rib bit through the middle. I like the fact that it's kind of larger around the kind of the hip area, and it comes in at the waist and it goes out again at the top. But I'm just not feeling it. It's kind of there, but it's kind of not. So I wanted something that I could wear as an undergarment rather than as a garment in itself. And this kind of says to me it wants to be worn as a garment in itself. Like, it wouldn't sit nicely underneath other clothes. And so what's the point in me finishing something that I'm then not going to wear? Why? People might think that, oh, well, you've spent all this time kind of knitting this, to rip it all out is just a waste of your time. But to me, it's more of a waste of my time to finish it and then not use it. Whereas I can rip it all out, have a little think, and then start again with a project in this yarn that I know I'm going to wear. And that for me is not a waste of my time. By knitting this, by following the pattern, by going through that process, I have learned. So I have gained knowledge. I have discovered a new stitch, which I really like. I have discovered more about vintage knitting patterns and how they were written. I've discovered that I really like this yarn, and I really want to make something out of it that I'm going to wear. And so for me, that's not a waste of time. There are things that I have learned which are going to be valuable to me moving forward. So today is the day where we say fare thee well to the vest in mesh stitch, and little bunny Fufu will be reincarnated as a new project in the future. I think it might be another vest, but I think I'm going to look very carefully at what pattern I'm going to use for that. With regards to kind of what comes next, I do have a couple of ideas, and I have some big ideas and some little ideas. One of my smaller ideas is that I have another vintage pattern. I've been on a vintage pattern kick for a Shetland Spencer, which a Spencer is a vest, an undergarment vest. And I purchased the pattern on Etsy, and it has variants for long sleeve, short sleeve, no sleeve, and kind of what's called an opera top, which is kind of the one with the little straps and like a sweetheart neckline. They call for lace weight yarn, Shetland 2-ply, which is our lace weight now. And I have one sitting in my stash, which is a single ply superwash merino from Gamer Crafting. And this is the colourway Wayland Yutani. And this has been in my stash for about 3 years. And I did have the idea of casting on a Shetland hat with it, because I really liked the idea of using a very traditional pattern with very non-traditional colours. But I think this would be a really lovely super soft vest. And so I think that might happen. And the wonderful thing about this pattern is I would be using the correct weight yarn, and it also has two sizes on it. It has a 34 to 36 inch size and a 38 to 40 inch size. So I can actually follow the pattern exactly. I wouldn't have to do any modifications or any kind of real thinking. The only difference would be is that I would cast it on in the round and do it in the round. So I'm pondering that. That may happen, that may not happen. The other thing I have been thinking about is a spin. And I have recently been a lot more deliberate in my spinning, thinking about how I'm going to be spinning things, why I'm going to be spinning things, what technique I'm going to use to create the yarn, because all of those things have an impact on the final yarn that's produced. And for Christmas, I was very lucky and I was given a jumper quantity of yarn delic fibre from John Arbon Textiles. And I really, really want to make a striped jumper out of it. I found a pattern that I like, and again, it calls for 3-ply vintage weight yarn. So that is a light fingering yarn, and I really want to spin it. So I'm gonna give it a go. I'm going to try and spin a vintage 3-ply yarn. I've never done a 3-ply before. I have small dalliances with chain plying when I've had leftovers on bobbins, but I've never actually done a kind of a 3-ply, as in spun 3 bobbins and then plied them together, which is what I'm going to do for this spin. I've never really gone into a spin either with a very specific weight in mind, which is going to push me to be very consistent with my spinning. It means I need to work out how thin each of my singles needs to be so that when they're combined together, the yarn isn't too thick. And yeah, this I think is going to be a year-long project for me. So I think this is going to be a big ongoing project. I haven't started it yet. I'm just clearing my last project on my Ashford traditional wheel, which is a gift spin, so I'm not going to show it to you. And then I'm going to start on this project and see what happens, and I will keep you updated as I go along. So that is what I have been making. That is what I plan to make, and I will see you next time. Bye.